My name is Deborah Gallant, and you are at a deep dive presented by Entrepreneurs Forever. It's a program we run every month, and we try to come up with a topic and bring in an expert on something that we know that our small business owners need to know about and very likely don't have access to somebody with a level of expertise that we can get. And so we bring them in. We're not selling you anything. We're really just trying to inform you. So this month, we're going to be talking about if you have employees, you need a handbook. And Myra Quick is going to be our presenter, and we'll get to her in just a minute. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Entrepreneurs Forever, about some of our upcoming programs. We're going to go into the presentation. All of that's going to be recorded, and then the Q&A will not be recorded. We will turn off the recording about an hour into it or so, and then give you guys a chance to ask any of your own questions that you might have. And, you'll have this amazing access to Myra, our HR professional. So again, today's topic is about employee handbooks, and there's going to be a worksheet, which Donan is driving. So please don't stop driving to download the workbook, the worksheet, but I'll send it to Amanda and Laura and anyone else so that they can follow along. But you could just take notes, and we will send it to you as an attachment along with the recording afterwards as well. For those of you who might not know, Entrepreneurs Forever's mission is to empower all small business owners to grow thriving businesses that sustain their families and support their communities. We do that with monthly peer groups. And if you aren't already a member and you want to learn more about our peer-to-peer learning, you can attend one of our weekly business boosts, and that's the link there. I have started telling people what the upcoming topics are because I find that if I don't do it at the beginning, I don't get around to doing it at the end. So the next one coming up, a Forever Forward, is on great sales conversations. That's going to be on August 9th at 8:30 in the morning. And the next month's deep dive is Can You Afford to Retire? With Lauren Fiffick. So we have, we're always trying to think about what you need. If you have other ideas, I'm always open to them. The one disclaimer I'm going to give you is this presentation does not take the place of professional advice from your own paid advisors. It's meant to be helpful, insightful, and I will say that Myra does sometimes do this for people for a fee, and you could talk to her afterwards, but this is not a sales presentation. And if there's anything that's legal, you should just check it with your own advisors. So I'm going to give you a little context here. Many of our Entrepreneurs Forever businesses start as solo enterprises and then start hiring people. And last month, we did a webinar on hiring your first employee. And that's why this month, the follow-on is once you've hired that first employee, you have to have a handbook. And Myra is going to tell us more about it. Now, I'm going to stop sharing, and you're going to see something really weird, which is our presenter, Myra's camera doesn't work, but that's okay because she's going to start sharing right now with her deck. She'll tell you about herself. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see her, but it'll still be a very informative presentation. And while she's bringing that up, I'm going to also in the chat drop your worksheet. So Myra, you can take over the sharing and I'll send them the worksheet. And again, sorry for no camera, but you're still going to get a bunch of great info.
All right. Can everybody see my screen, or everyone that's not driving?
We can see it.
There you go. Okay, hold on. Thank you so very much, Deborah, for the introduction. I appreciate it. I do apologize. I was explaining I've never had a problem before with my camera not working, but apparently today it doesn't want to work. So, and that's disappointing because I did my hair and stuff. So I'm Myra Quick, and I own Fast Forward Learning and Development. And I do HR consulting for very small businesses. I also am a mentor with E4All. If you went through that program, congratulations, it's amazing. I come to you with about 25 years of HR experience. I have worked as everything from a generalist to an assistant director in finance and healthcare and higher education. So I have kind of gone through a lot of industries and a lot of different positions in human resources. I've done it my whole career. I love it. So when I semi-retired, I decided to open my own business, and my heart is with those individuals who have very small businesses, because this is my second small business I've owned, and I came from a family of small business owners. So that's a little bit about me. And one of the things that I like to bring to the table for folks who are starting to hire is that if you have ever been a manager, you know that there are lots of rules and regulations. Even if you've been an employee, there are lots of rules and regulations. I read today that if you are an employer of less than 15 employees, you have 54 federal laws that apply to hiring. Once you get over 15, you have another 10. And once you get over 50, you have 4 more. It just keeps going on and on and on. So it's important for you to provide yourself some sort of coverage whenever that happens. So I normally like to ask who's in the room. Can anyone who can, would you like to share your name and your company and how many employees you have?
I've muted everyone, but you can unmute yourself if you're in a place that you can talk. I think Joanne has 3. She's on Cape Cod and she has 2 employees.
Uh-huh.
She has a studio where they do permanent makeup. Do I get that
Oh,
right? Yes.
hi. Joanne, we're
Laura,
close. We're close. I'm in Plymouth.
Wonderful.
Laura runs a composting firm, and I'm not sure how many full-time and part-time employees she has. Laura?
Hi, yes, thank you, Deborah. Yes, my name's Lara, and I have 6 employees now.
Nice. What's the name of your business, Laura?
Warm Return LLC.
Okay. Thank
She's
you.
in the Pittsburgh area. Amanda, are you in a place you can unmute and introduce yourself? She's a makeup and hairstylist in Massachusetts, and she also has a team of 3.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I always like to know who I'm speaking with. And I told you a little bit about myself. So today we're going to talk about the pros and cons of handbooks, and there's good and bad to everything, including handbooks. I'm going to share with you what you should include, and handbooks can go anywhere from 10 pages to 120 pages. I've seen them all. Most recently, the one that I was looking at was 81 pages. So it depends on the size of your business. It depends on the type of business that you're in, what you're going to include. But today we will talk about some of the basic things that you need to make sure you include. And then we'll talk about publications and updates and how you handle that. So Deborah had mentioned that she has a couple of handouts for you. One of the things that I am providing you today is a sample table of contents for a very basic handbook, as well as some resources, because if you have not put a handbook together and you're getting ready to, it's always a good idea to have some resources at your fingertips. One of the things that I did not include in there, but I wished I would have now, is Society for Human Resource Management. And you can join the organization if you want to. They are a huge help and a wealth of information when it comes to all things human resources. They are the epitome of organizations. They're also known as SHRM, SHRM. So if you have not heard of them, you should take a look at them and just poke around their website, because there's just literally anything and everything. And if you join, you can get templates and you can get updates.
Can you get that stuff if you're not a member?
No, you can read the information online, which they have a lot, and you can get their newsletter, which gives updates. But if you join, then you get access to the templates and all that sort of thing.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So content areas, as you can see from the list of content areas that I've provided you, you can see how a handbook could easily go 120 pages, right? So an introduction, your employment policies, your workplace conduct, which is one of the places that most people think of whenever they think of an employee handbook, compensation and benefits, work hours, attendance, employee relations, health and safety, training and development, performance, technology, security, employee resources. So obviously the biggest reason to provide a handbook is because people like structure. They might not tell you that, but they like to have structure. They like to know the yes and the no, the black and the white, the I can do, I can't do. And it frees you up from answering all the same questions over and over and over and over if you have a handbook, right? It can also be your best friend or your worst enemy if you're called into court. And it would be your worst enemy if, in fact, you have put it in writing and you are not following your own policies and procedures. So I just want to put that out there. As Deborah said, this is not to give you legal advice. I'm not an attorney, never have been an attorney. And I always suggest that if you are employing people, you at least have a employment attorney's phone number in your contacts, because you never know when you might need it, and they're a great resource. And whatever money you would spend to get their advice will be well worth it in the end. If you get to a point where you need an attorney, you need an attorney, right?
Are you legally required to have an employee handbook and have
No,
people?
you are not.
You're
It
not.
is not a legal requirement, but if you have one, you are legally bound to follow it.
And so is the employee. So, you get them to sign it and then you
Yep.
can refer back to it if you have
Yes,
issues,
at
right?
the end, at the end of every handbook should be an employee acknowledgement saying,
Okay,
I
and
have,
that lets you also say you were in violation of X, Y, or Z policy, which they can't say
yes,
they didn't know because you
right,
had it written down.
exactly, exactly. And that is a document that can go into their personnel file and should go into their personnel file to show that you have issued them a copy. And that they acknowledge receipt of that copy. That does not mean it has to be a paper copy. It can be an electronic copy as long as you have a signature on file. Okay.
Okay, but I think that you said the downside of it is if you say there's a policy, then
You
you
better
need to
follow it.
actually be enforcing the policy for it to be legally binding.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, it can still be legally binding whether you followed it or not, but you will be in violation of your own
right,
policy.
got it.
So the first thing in a handbook, a lot of people think of it as just the, like I said, the yes and no and the do and don't, but actually it can be an introduction to your company. And it can be a great onboarding tool. So you want to have some sort of a welcome message about, hi, this is who you have joined. This is who we are. We're glad you're here. A little bit of history about your company. Are you a woman-owned business? And a little bit of history about maybe when you started business or where your company initiated from, your mission and your vision. Mission and vision is important. If you are in let's say fast food, your mission is to provide your customers with excellent service and great food at a price that they can afford, right? That's a basic mission. Your vision might be that you decide, you would like to do that all over Cape Cod instead of just in Provincetown or something. Your values, what values do you hold at the forefront of your business? Is it transparency? Is it truth? Is it, customer service? What are your values? And then the purpose of the handbook, you need to let them know that the purpose of the handbook is to provide them guidance on commonplace issues within your organization. And so that's a little bit about what you want in your introduction. It doesn't have to be lengthy, but it's a nice way to say, welcome to our organization. This is who we are. This is why we exist. And we're glad that you're going to be part of our organization and help us accomplish our mission and vision. So now you start getting into some of the nitty gritty. And one of the resources that I provided you was the website to the EEOC, so Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. These are folks you never want to run up against if you can avoid it, right? Because when they come in and they start poking around, they're going to look at everything. They're going to say this is probably not an isolated case of discrimination, and it's probably everywhere, and they're going to start looking for it. So you want to familiarize yourself with Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they are there for a reason. They are there to protect individuals who are working, who are being discriminated against. You also want to include, I feel it's good, it's not a even must have, but it's really good to include your statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the reason is that it is something that identifies the fact that you support Title VII. And Title VII is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And it talks about how a company does not discriminate against individuals for a number of things. It might be religion, it might be race, it might be ethnic background, it could be a million things, right? And so familiarize yourself with Title VII. It's always a good idea to have a DEI statement that says we support diversity in our organization. And we promote those individuals with differences, with backgrounds that are different than our own. Employment classification. So this is such as exempt and non-exempt. Now, I'm going to tell you that that classification right now is up in the air by the federal government.
And you need to back up and tell me what exempt and non-exempt is, because I don't even know.
Oh, okay. Exempt and non-exempt. We are talking about overtime. So if an employee is to be paid overtime, or if an employee is exempt from getting overtime. So that being the case, the federal government right now is looking at changing the law around who is exempt. Years ago, actually, as of right now, a lot of it had to do with people thought of being exempt as a manager, but there were a lot of people who were doing that do work that do not manage people necessarily, that qualify as individuals that can be exempt from overtime. And it has a duties list, and it has a salary threshold that must be met. So those things are in flux right now, but you need to identify if you, in your handbook, if you have employees that are exempt and non-exempt, or if everyone's non-exempt, everyone could be non-exempt, right? Except maybe you. So, and you're going to pay them overtime, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to pay information. You need to put in there, if you're running background checks for individuals for education, or you are going to run previous work experience, or you are going to run a criminal background check, which I strongly encourage, you need to notify them in your handbook that you're doing that. In addition to that, there's a whole set of documents that you would have to provide to them whenever you hire them about what background checks are being done. But it's always a good idea to put in your handbook what background checks you are running, and if you plan on rerunning those. So for instance, if it's someone with a cash handling background, you want to rerun that every 3 years, you need to put that in your handbook, that every, 36 months, they'll be subjected to a new background check.
So Myra, one quick question here. If you've already hired the person and already done the background check and gotten their permission to do it,
Yeah.
Isn't that the cart before the horse? Because you're putting in the employee handbook something you already did.
Well, but you'll have new employees coming in.
So you're just saying it's going to be,
Yeah,
they don't think they were singled out, right? We do
right.
background checks on everyone.
Right. And so the understanding is that, okay, you've been there, you got hired 2 years ago and you had your background check done. It is a good idea, though, if this is a new process, to start running it every 3rd year, whatever you're going to do, that you notify them separate of the handbook. That says this is a new policy we're putting in place. And so if you've been here over 36 months, we'll be running another background check. But you do need to put it in your handbook to let them know, you're not just going to do one background check and then you're going to be scot-free. Employment eligibility in I-9, you need to put a statement in there that says that you are in compliance with the Immigration and Naturalization Act, and that you will in fact be running their I-9 to verify they are US citizen or have the right to work in the US. Okay. All right, so this is where we get, to the things that a lot of people think about when they think of handbooks. So your code of conduct, this is, these sorts of things are the ones that cause you a nightmare in your employment, right? Because people don't know how to behave sometimes. And so you need to let them know in your code of conduct what is acceptable behavior and what is not. That being disrespectful to coworkers is not acceptable, or whatever your code of conduct is, you need to let them know what your expectations are around how they behave when they are working for you and getting paid. Anti-harassment and discrimination, it is not required in the state of Massachusetts, at least, to do harassment and discrimination training on an annual basis. Some states it is. I would like to remind you that for the purposes of this presentation, we'll be talking mostly about federal law, and state law could be different. In Massachusetts, a lot of our state laws trump the federal law. The reason being is that if it is more beneficial to the employee, whichever law is more beneficial to the employee, that's the law you follow. And so in the state of Connecticut, for instance, they require that they go through annual harassment and discrimination training. I think it's a good thing to at least make it available. There are a lot of them you can get to online for free. Attorneys will do them almost all day long, and sometimes for free, you never know. But have an anti-harassment and discrimination policy that says we will not tolerate harassment and discrimination in our organization. And it's okay for you to say that all instances of harassment or discrimination that are being reported will in fact be investigated. Conflict of interest. So this is interesting. I'm going to talk to the woman who has a salon, right? Because I just recently had a woman that I was mentoring with that owns a nail salon, had employed someone else, or had employed someone who worked not only there, but at another nail salon simultaneously, and then decided to go to work for the other nail salon full-time and totally trashed this person online. Conflict of interest, and of course, then they're going to want to take all those clients that they've built at salon A with them to salon B, right? So it's okay to have a conflict of interest policy. I came from the finance industry where if you worked in the banking trade and that organization had a stock investment company as part of their portfolio, you couldn't go be a stockbroker somewhere else because that would be a conflict of interest. So it's all right to have a conflict of interest policy in there if you find it is important. And oftentimes it helps to cover you to keep
What
people.
you're talking about is a little bit of a non-compete, really.
Non-competes are no longer valid. Non-competes aren't a thing anymore. And so conflict of interest says, if I am doing this job at salon A and this job at salon B, how do I decide with a new client where I'm going to take them? See what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it does become a conflict of interest for you personally, right, as the employee, but it's also a conflict of interest for the employer. So do some reading on that if it's something you think you want to put into your handbook. Confidentiality, I believe that everyone should have a confidentiality statement in their handbook that says you're not to share information about our company outside of our company with competitors, or any confidential information. So if you have someone working for you that has access to employee information, that's confidential and they can't share that outside of the organization. Information that they might have around an employee's health situation is confidential, and it will run them up against HIPAA laws violations if they are sharing health information that they have access to through their work with you outside of the company. So confidentiality, what you learn inside of here stays inside of here. Appearance, a lot of people say, oh, we don't do a dress code, but appearance goes beyond just a dress code. Appearance can go into a lot of things. So for instance, if you have a restaurant, and of course you want them to be neat and clean and, you know, good hygiene, those sorts of things go into appearance. And if you have any customer facing employees, you want to address those things. You know, we expect that all of our employees will come to work neat and clean and with good hygiene, right? Because you never want to have that conversation with an employee about their hygiene. And I've had to do it more than once in my career, and it's very uncomfortable. So put it right out there. But for instance, go back to the thought of someone working in a restaurant. And so appearance also talks about, you have to have your hair in a hairnet because it's it has to do with your safe serve. And so you want to make sure that, you know, you have people who are, they don't have their hair falling all around their shoulders and into food and et cetera, et cetera. So appearance, think about it from the standpoint of, what does your customer expect? And is there any liability, for instance? If you are in a manufacturing situation and someone has their hair and it's long and it is not pulled back, it becomes a safety issue. Because if they're running equipment and it gets caught in the equipment and they get hurt, that's a big problem. Use of company property. This has been very popular lately because, quite honestly, people begin thinking of their computers as their own personal property, and it's not. It's company issued property, unless you have them working on their own personal computer. But for the most part, if it's owned by your company, it's your property, and you can tell them how to use it. If you have a construction company and somebody decides to take your jackhammer home and use it at their house and they leave it in the backyard and it gets stolen, that's a problem, right? So use of company property needs to be addressed. And you may very well let them use company property, but you may say it has to be checked out or it has to be approved or whatever, but you have to lay out in that handbook what the process is. Social media policies. People avoid putting these in, and I don't really know why. The deal is that anybody can have social media, and that's fine, but they need to keep their social media posts separate from your business posts. So they can, if they have access to your business accounts and they follow you on LinkedIn or whatever, they should not be posting their personal feelings about your business or anything that happened inside of your business on your social media. They want to post on their personal social media. You can't stop them. But they shouldn't be posting those things on the company's social media.
I have two questions about workplace conduct that I think are timely. One is, where do you lay out expectations for remote workers? Is this within workplace conduct? Because, you know, this is the people who are doing their laundry or walking their dog during the workday. And do you lay all that out somewhere?
I don't. I would address remote work, but the deal is, once you are employing someone as a remote worker, you have to trust that they're going to get their work done during the amount of hours that you give them to get it done. And if they decide to walk their dog, you can't really prevent them from doing that.
Okay, I just wondered if,
Yeah.
you know, how we should set that out. And the other one, because this actually, I worked someplace once where I had my coworkers lighting up cannabis during work calls. And that felt to me like, even though it's legal in Massachusetts, it felt wildly inappropriate for them to be doing it during
It is
work.
wildly inappropriate. It's as inappropriate as if they decided to crack open a beer.
But on the other hand, you don't have a prohibition against that, right?
I would say that during work hours, they can't do that because they are in contact with your customers. And you do not want them in contact with your customers while they are under the influence of anything.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so payroll information. So I'm sure that if you are employing people, you are familiar with the Fair Labor Standards Act. If not, you should probably make yourself familiar. And again, your state will have one and the federal will have one. So the Department of Labor, you can get to the Fair Labor Standards Act department from there, but you should also check your the state in which you are working. And if you work in more than one state, you need to know all the states that you do business in. And so you want to put in your payroll information, when employees get paid, what's the process to get paid? So for instance, if they submit a time card, and who needs to sign off on those hours? And so if, you get paid twice a month, you need to let them know that. And if there is a deadline for submitting payroll, you need to let them know that as well. What's the deadline for them to get those hours into you in order to get paid in a timely fashion? If you are paying overtime, you need to list out, do you pay overtime over 8 hours in a day or over 40 hours in a week? There's a big difference there. And there's some bizarre idea out there, and I'm not sure where it came from, but I read it the other day. They want to set it, someone suggested setting it up so that overtime would be paid after 160 hours in a month. So think about that. Some employer works you 2 weeks at 80 hours a week and then doesn't work you for the next 2 weeks. You don't get paid overtime for either of those 80-hour weeks. So that just was the most bizarre thing I'd ever heard of, but somebody's floating it around out there. So, but that's where the difference in overtime comes in, and employees need to know if they work over 80 hours or 40 hours in a week, do they get paid overtime or over 8 hours in a day? All right.
This may be the wrong time to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it now anyway. If I have 1099 contractors, and that's a sort of a different thing than
That's a whole nother nightmare.
but some of these policies would apply to them, like if an appearance thing or non-disclosure, whatever. Can I create a version of it for the 1099 people?
Not a handbook, you can't.
No.
What I would do is I would create a document that maybe you title expectations of XYZ company working with 1099 contractors. And
Laura
just
okay, great.
you don't want to
Laura's
call it a
asking
handbook.
the question, in the situation with the overtime, wouldn't it have to match the pay frequency?
Pardon me?
So Laura, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, sir. I have trouble getting myself on and off mute. So, I mean, I have some experience in this kind of stuff with like payroll and whatever. So if you're paying monthly in your situation, in your example, couldn't you actually make it that if it's more than 160 hours in a month because you only get paid once a month, doesn't it kind of have to match up with the pay frequency?
Well, I understand what you're saying. I would say that that would be a very dicey situation. I would not base overtime on a monthly schedule. I just wouldn't. I would either make it daily or weekly.
Are there guidelines for that, like on FLSA?
Yes, there should be.
Okay.
I'm not a payroll person. I'll put that out there.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on. There's a lot more to get in our handbooks.
Yeah, that was a good question. Thank you so much. All right. So now let's talk about benefits. And you don't have to offer them. All right. So we're just gonna put that out there. You don't have to offer them holidays and vacation time and bereavement days and jury duty. You don't have to do that. Certain states, you do have to offer sick time, and Massachusetts is one of them. But if you are going to offer vacations, sick time, all of these benefits, you need to outline in your handbook, because this is where a ton of questions will come in, and you'll be answering the same question over and over and over if you don't have it in your handbook. So what is your vacation policy? Do they earn vacation on accrual basis every month, or do you give them an allotment at the beginning of the year and they say, and you just let them fly with it? Do you have a personal time off bank, which is called PTO, which means you throw all of this together and you let them take whatever they want? That is a decision that you as a business owner will need to make. I caution you about PTO time only because it's very hard to track. And what I mean by that is at the end of the year, let's say you hired somebody, you gave them $200, 200 hours in PTO time. And in the first 90 days, they took it and then they left, boom, you just paid somebody 200 hours of time off, right? So just be careful about that. Just think through it before you do it. Vacation, again, will they accrue it on a monthly basis? How many hours will they accrue? And how many hours will they need to work? So if they're part-time, will they earn, a half an hour for every hour that they work? If they're full-time, will they work, accrue an hour for every 8 hours? What is the policy? And then how often or when can they take it? Is it after 90 days? Is it after a year? A lot of companies will say you earn 2 weeks of vacation after you've been employed a year. So what will that be? Your sick leave policy, what you will allow them to take for sick time. I want you to know, unless they are covered under Family Medical Leave Act or a paid family medical leave, you cannot ask for a doctor's note because they've been out sick for a day. That's not a thing you want to do, right? Holidays. If you have holidays that you're going to pay them for, what are those holidays and what will they be paid? And if that holiday falls on their normal work day, do they get the holiday? If their normal work schedule is Tuesday through Saturday and the holiday is on Monday, do they get a holiday? Lay out what that is. Bereavement pay. It doesn't have to be paid time off, but you can offer bereavement time off. So if someone's family member passes away, who is involved in that? Do you cover it for aunts and uncles and cousins? Do you cover it only for immediate family? Who's
So many
covered in that?
decisions.
I know, it's crazy, right? And then you get into the problem of, if you offer it to immediate family members and then someone comes back and says, I need bereavement days for my aunt. And you're like, well, we don't really offer them for your aunt. And then they inform you that their aunt raised them. And so see why we need handbooks?
Myra, when I know that the kinds of employers that our small business owners are generally hiring hourly workers to do
Yes.
something. And I know that when I started out early in my career and was working hourly kinds of jobs, I had no expectation of any of this, that if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. Are the expectations different for hourly workers now, that they expect to have paid sick days, paid vacation days, paid holidays? Because again, in my experience, if you didn't work, you didn't get paid.
Right. And I think that it really depends on a couple of things. It depends on the size of the company. It also depends on how many hours are you working them. Are you working them 5 hours a week? Or are you working them 30 hours a week? So when you start deciding who's full-time and who's part-time, you need to identify, is full-time at 32 hours, is full-time at 40 hours, is full-time at 30 hours. It depends. And so anyone who is less than that, do they get these benefits of vacation time and holidays and anything else that you might offer? So yes, there are a lot of decisions to be made, and you don't have to offer them. Like I said, unless you're in the state of Massachusetts, and even part-time people will earn sick leave, and you need to know what that computation is. I don't, but you need to know it. And then jury duty, you always pay jury duty. So if it's their normal day to work and they are called in to do jury duty, you need to pay them while they're there. Okay. You pay them for the first 5 days, and then the court begins to pay them. And the court pays them some pittance of money that I don't remember, but it's not much.
Like $15 a day in their
Yeah, and you're gonna pay $20 to park.
Yeah.
So, but at any rate, those are the sorts of paid time off things that you need to look at. And are you going to offer them, or are you not going to offer them? Okay.
Myra, I'm sorry to interrupt. I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
It's
I'm really
okay.
bad with
Go ahead,
technology.
Laura.
I can't figure out how to make my face show up, Laura, so you're fine.
That's why I'm on my phone, because my computer did the same thing about 2 months ago. So for a company like mine, and I would think the hairdressers might have something similar, the makeup salons. So let's say with that example of jury duty, my employees, their days are, you know, Joshua works Monday, Tuesday, Mark is Wednesday, Saturday. But the hours vary based on the week, based on traffic. So like, is there, nobody in my company works an 8-hour day. This week, Monday might be 4 hours. Next week, Monday might be 6 hours. Like, does that mean I have to pay 8 hours even though they wouldn't normally work
No. Check this, but I think you would do the average daily hours. So if they normally
Okay.
work 20 hours a week, and so you would take that and divide it by the number of days that they would work, and they come up with 4.2 hours or whatever they come, that would be
Right.
your
Okay.
average. So that would be the amount of time that you would pay them for.
And again, is there a resource to find like a good guideline for how to
I
do that?
would
Like, do
use,
I look back for a month? Do I look back over the course of a year? You know?
I would look at Fair Labor Standards Act.
Okay. Thank you.
But again, I'm not a payroll person, but that's a good place to start.
Yeah, Laura, I would say also you should count your lucky stars that you have people who can be so flexible, because, lots of people out there are picky, and it's like, if you can't offer me 6 hours, I don't want the job. It's like, good for you that you found loyal people who will be that flexible. That's good.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, it's something people have talked to me about, but my employees seem to like it. We generally have just an understanding if, Joshua can't work his normal Monday, he and Mark work it out. Well, I'll work your Wednesday if you work my Monday. And it's really been a blessing for me, but we haven't wound up with anything like, yeah, what happens when you get called into jury duty and it's on the one day a week that you're actually scheduled. So thank you.
The other thing is, you'll see that more in your industry as well as food service, where they cover each other, right? They're like, I need the hours, but I can't work this day. So can we swap? Which is
My
nice.
background is in restaurant industry. So every time you talk about something, I'm like, oh yeah, we had to keep our fingernails clean. And I own a dirt business now. I'm like, if your fingernails aren't dirty, I don't know that you can work for me. So
Oh,
All right, let's keep going. I know you have more to cover.
we do. We have more to cover. So then we come into these lovelies, and these are not something you have to offer. They are what I call true benefits, right? These are the things that big companies can afford to offer. Small companies typically can't. But if you're going to offer health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, life insurance, retirement plans, blah, 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 you need to list it in your handbook. What you offer, if you offer it to just full-time employees, or if you offer it to, at what point can they qualify? And then how do they get it? And how do they pay for it? Right? So these are things that you don't have to offer. They're nice to do, but they are not, you have to do them. And so just keep in mind, it's a nice little thing if you can do it.
Can I also, Laura's asking a question is very much in keeping with what she's saying. Are we allowed to subsidize this stuff for them? But I also wonder, are there mandates that if you do health insurance, that the employer is expected to pick up 50%? Or could you get a group health insurance plan and let them pay for it all themselves?
Either way, you don't have to pay for a portion of it. You can subsidize it, and that's awesome. If you are, for instance, and I'll speak to Massachusetts because I know Massachusetts. So if you're working in the state of Massachusetts, you can offer them information on how to get the state plan. You don't pay for it, but it's nice to be able to say there is this resource for you. Did I answer your question, Deborah?
I think so.
Okay, good. All right, so performance reviews. You're gonna laugh. I love performance reviews. And I say that because I've worked where I didn't get one and I hated it. And so what I will tell you is that it doesn't have to be awful. If you are going to, you don't have to do them. You do not have to do them. But if you say you're going to do them, you have to do them. And so I do a whole session on how to get employee engagement through performance reviews. So whatever your process is, if your process says that after 1 year of employment, they'll get a performance review annually, then you need to list that out. If that's not something you're going to do, don't put it in your handbook. Because the first time you don't do it, somebody's going to file a complaint and you're going to be on the hanger for it. So, but performance review process, who gets them? Who gives them? How often will they be given or done? Training and development. This is an area, Laura, that I'm sure you probably do subsidize. If people have to go back and keep their certifications updated, you may actually subsidize some of that. If so, what will you cover? And what do you encourage them to do? If you are working in a, let's say, a restaurant situation where they have to update their certifications on health and safety, then what do you cover, if anything? And then if you have an onboarding process, what is that? And so by onboarding, I mean onboarding starts way before you hire somebody. Onboarding starts like when you're advertising out there and you're trying to get people interested, right? But it goes through after they have started with you. So your onboarding process is in the first 90 days, you will be provided training in order to know how to do the duties of your job to the best of your ability at the end of 90 days, or whatever your situation is. If you have an onboarding process, lay it out. What are you committing to do for them to make it easier for them to acclimate to your organization? I think that onboarding, training and development, and performance reviews are extremely important in this day and age for this reason. We are struggling with one of the most disconnected generations ever, and they are having a hard time feeling as though they are part of something. And first of all, keep in mind, when you hire a new employee, if they've not worked a lot before, you have to teach them how to be an employee first and foremost. Then you can teach them all the things about doing the job that they have to do. So these are things that you can do for relatively little cost, because there's a ton of training and development out there. It takes your time to find it. And then you need to provide it to them and say, hey, we're going to have a lunch and learn on Tuesday, and we're going to go over XYZ topic. It's an hour and I'm going to buy pizza, and, come in if you can. Or if you do it virtually, say it's a lunch and learn, bring your lunch. I'm going to register us all for this seminar or this webinar or whatever it is. And it's not going to cost you anything. I'd love to see you there. Right? So then we get into work hours and attendance. And so what is the work schedule? Is there a work schedule? Do you have different shifts? Do you have a morning shift? Do you have an evening shift? Do you have a night shift? Do you have a weekend shift? Is the expectation that people work after hours? I think that's a really bad idea, but some people need to be on call. So for instance, if you have a business and you employ people who do snow removal, they're going to have to be on call because when it snows, it snows. And so work schedule expectations, attendance and punctuality. I say it is a good idea to put some sort of a comment in there that says it is expected that if you are healthy enough to work, that you know, show up for your work schedules. I don't think it's a bad idea. Punctuality, if you are working as a teller in a bank, you have to be there on time because the bank has to open, right? And so that is okay for you to notice or notify them that the expectation is that they will arrive in order to begin their shift on time. And you don't have to list, at 8 o'clock or 4 o'clock or whatever, but on time, whatever that on time is for them. And then you need to tell them if they can't make it, what's the process? Who do they notify? How soon do they have to notify them? Should it be, you need to notify your manager as soon as possible, or do you need to notify your manager within 15 minutes of the beginning of your shift? Whatever your expectation is. Meals and breaks. Now, again, Fair Labor Standards Act has meals and breaks information out there. By law, after 6 hours, they get a 15-minute break, right? So you need to make sure that you're accommodating those and you are standing by those. But what is your meal break expectation? A lot of companies, like I've worked for, I don't know how many companies where they're like, you get a 30-minute lunch, but they also off the books give you 2 15-minute breaks, or the department will decide to give you an extra break, right?
I want to tell you that I think many places don't give you a meal break and they expect you to work right through. And then some people take it and some people don't. But being clear about it makes perfect sense to me.
You have to be clear about it because first and foremost, by law, you have to give them a break, right? And so if they choose not to take that break, that's their personal choice. However, if it becomes a lot of exempt people do this. They don't take lunch. They just work, 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 work. Well, that's great until they burn out, right? And then they don't work. So I think it's a good idea to put in there, what are we offering you or what are we providing you for meal breaks? It also prevents you when you start growing, it prevents managers from deciding what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, right? Well, we don't have time we're too busy to give them a lunch. Well, by law, you have to give them a lunch, right? So, because they're working 8 hours. So it's a good thing to have listed in your handbook what will be given for meal breaks. And it's a very,
Myra,
very
well,
popular question.
I'm sorry I have so many questions. This is just
No.
really interesting to me. So one thing, like, as we've been a very small company for a good amount of time, I just let my employees, if you need to stop, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to stop and eat something, just go ahead and stop and eat. Everybody's responsible. So like, I don't care. I'm going to still pay you for it.
Mhm.
Somebody told me that even though I'm choosing to pay them for whatever time they do take for themselves, that I should be making sure they're punching in and out of the time clock so that
Mhm.
if I were to be audited on my payroll records, they can see, oh yeah, you
Mhm.
did give them a break.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
I agree. And here's another reason why. Because in HR, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong eventually. And
Yeah.
so you give them, you say, yeah, go ahead, go grab something to eat. And they're on the clock. They walk out your door and they get hit by a bus. Guess who's liable? You are, because they were on the clock.
I
Yeah.
think I'm going to go back to doing this all by myself.
A
Yep.
lot of people feel that way. But yeah, there is a reason for that. You know, if you're gonna give them a lunch hour, make sure they are clocking in and out, because if something unfortunate happens, or they rob a bank while they're out, they were on your time clock, right? So just make sure that they're keeping accurate records of their time. Inclement weather policy, if you have inclement weather, what happens and who do you notify? And how are you going to notify employees that they don't need to come in? You guys are all small enough, it's probably just a phone tree or a phone call. But if there's inclement weather and someone can't get in, how do they contact you? And you know, if you're in Florida, if you get hit with a hurricane, you know, what happens? What's the process, right? And so what do you do about that? And what's the expectation of the employer to notify the employee? And what's the expectation of the employee to notify their employer that they can't make it, right? And at what point do you pay them? You know, if it is a snowstorm and the governor has closed down the entire state and you are not a essential worker, quote unquote, do you get paid for that time off or not? Okay. It's also fun. All right, employee relations. So the part of the point of a handbook is to improve your employee relations, right? And so do you have an open door policy? If there are complaints, can people come in and file them with you? You know, the buck stops here, as they say. So who do I go to if I have a complaint? Who do I go to if I have a complaint about my manager? Right? Because normally you'll say, take it up with your manager. But what if the issue is the manager? You
And
know,
what if it's you?
exactly. So what
I was
is the
wondering that.
complaint? Pardon me?
I was wondering the same thing. What if your issue's with me? Then who do you talk to?
Right. And in a very small company, that's a problem, right? And so that's when you say, I have an open door policy. And if your complaint is with me, I want to hear it. Because if you don't give them an avenue to file that complaint, they're going to tell 50 other people and it won't be pretty. Or they're going to go to the EEOC and file a complaint. Right? So open your door and say, if you have a problem, even with me, I want to hear about it. And then listen and make sure that you are acting upon whatever it is that their complaint is, and document it. Document that you had this conversation with them, that you allowed them the opportunity to voice their opinion and their concerns. And this is what I did to address it. That falls under disciplinary action. That leads us into disciplinary action. So if you are disciplining someone for something, you may or may not have a disciplinary action where you go, first, we're going to do this. And then if that's not fixed, we're going to go here. And then if it's not fixed, we're going to go here. You don't have to have a 3-step process. You just need to let them know that if in fact they are not doing their work to the expectation, then the disciplinary action will be taken up to and including termination. It can be that simple. Involuntary termination, if you're letting someone go, you do know you need to produce them a paycheck, right? Within 24 hours. You don't wait until the next payday. The resignation is a nice thing to have. If you can request that they give you 2 weeks notice, but you can't make them do anything, right? You cannot hold their vacation time or any paid time off that you would normally pay them upon termination. You can't hold that because they didn't give you 2 weeks of notice. But it's okay for you to say the expectation is that if you work, and typically the deal is whatever your vacation accrual is. So if you earn 2 weeks a year, you would ask for a 2-week notice. If you earn 4 weeks a year, you would ask for a 4-week notice. So, you know, you might just say, we'd like to, or we request that you give us at least 7 days notice, because a lot of times when these people are working, like you said, Laura, 20 hours a week, and they're here and they're there and they're everywhere, they're not going to give you 2 weeks notice. It's nice if they did. You can certainly ask for it. And do you
do.
want it in writing? Absolutely. Even if it's just like, I quit today, you want it in writing to show that they left your employment, right? The last thing you need is for them to say, I quit, and then next week they show up for work, right? What are you gonna do? Exit interviews, a lot of companies don't do them. A lot of companies do them. It's totally up to you, but if you intend to do them and you put it in your handbook and say you intend to do them, then you have to do it. And exit interviews are good for finding out if you have a bigger problem, and that being a systemic problem. So if you have 5 people that quit in a year under the same manager, that's telling you something, and you want to make sure that you're checking in with those people. Okay, questions on any of that?
We're going to go a little bit long on the presentation part, but I don't mind because the questions are coming as we go. And I know you still have more to cover, in fact, quite a bit. So let's keep rolling.
We will. Okay. So I'm sorry. So health and safety, OSHA. You need to know OSHA because you don't want them to know you. So occupational safety and health. So workplace safety guidelines. You need to know what the workplace safety guidelines are. You need to make sure that you are following them. It's a good idea for you to put your posters up in your place of employment that cover things such as OSHA, Fair Labor Standards Act. So all of the federal guidelines, you need to post them. It will answer a lot of questions for employees. And so workplace safety guidelines, you never want to run afoul of OSHA. They're kind of like EEOC. You don't want them up in your grill. And so make sure that you are following the safety standard guidelines for your industry and emergency procedures. Who do they notify? What happens if there's an emergency? I was working in a retail organization one time, and there were a lot of robberies happening right around us. And the guy showed up at my front door. Thank God the door stuck and he didn't get in. But the first question I had is, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to notify? I called the local police. They're like, oh no, you're on a campus. You have to call campus police. I'm like, I don't even have that phone number. So, what is the emergency procedures? And if there is let's say an earthquake, I worked in a hospital and we had an earthquake one time. The expectation is you don't leave that building until all of those patients are taken care of. And that meant me as an HR person. I had to stay there until I knew everybody was safe. So what's the emergency procedures? Workman's compensation. You need to make sure that if someone is injured on the job, you tell them you need to go have it checked out. It needs to be done immediately. Here's how you get the workman's compensation form. And this is our number. Take this with you. You need to make all of that information available to them. Substance-free policy. This used to be only cover things such as alcohol, but it now covers all substances. So you need to have a policy that says you may not be working under the influence. So when you say working under the influence, that means whether you're remote, whether you're in person, doesn't matter. You cannot be under the influence of a substance while you're working. Workplace violence prevention. Most companies don't address this, and I think every company should address this. And so you need to state in there, you cannot bring weapons into the workplace. And I don't care what kind of a state you work in, you have the right to say, you are not going to have weapons on our premise. So workplace violence, if you see it, report it. You need to say that. If you see something suspicious, you need to report it. And this is who you need to report it to. And you need to do it immediately. I worked in a banking situation one time where I worked in Boulder, Colorado, where if you know anything about Boulder, they're a little odd sometimes. And we had guys walking around in the lobby in witches' hats. And so I reported it. Well, come to find out, it was around Halloween time. These guys came in, they were looking at the artwork we had hanging all over the bank. I thought they were casing the place, but I did. They actually called the police. They hunted these guys down in the center of Boulder. But to be honest with you, I'd much rather have had that
Better safe
happen.
than sorry.
Yes, then have them come back at 6 o'clock when we're closing the bank and rob us, right? So workplace violence prevention. All right, technology. As we have become so dependent upon technology, you need to have an acceptable use policy, which says you are not going to be shopping online on our computers on our business time, right? So what's the acceptable use policy? The acceptable use policy says you may use during work hours, you are to be utilizing our technology for work purposes only.
Myra,
Emailing, yep,
we've actually covered some of this in a previous webinar we did on cybersecurity, so I'm going to ask you to
okay,
go a little faster, but I just
yep,
want to clarify one thing. If this feels like it's overwhelming, and I can admit it does, and Laura, I love I'm going to go back to working alone,
but
but
it is,
there are templates for the language on this stuff. You don't have to make up what an acceptable
right,
policy is. So
right.
I think the reason that Myra is drilling on all of these is having these policies in place, decide what they are, grab some language, put it in, protects you and protects the employee, because you all are walking into it with your eyes open about what the expectations are. So are there any more slides we need to cover on this?
Not on technology. Do.
I will refer to the cybersecurity
Yep.
webinar and send you a link to that when I send you the
That
recording.
would be great. Oh, there is one other slide I want to cover. So acknowledgement of receipt, updates, and legal review. So I already told you I'm not an attorney, but if you are going to issue a handbook, please have an employment attorney review it before you issue it. Okay, it's not expensive to have done, but have it done. Acknowledgement of receipt. I already said that you need to have an acknowledgement that they've received it. And you need to keep a copy of that in their personnel file. Anytime you update it, they have to sign off again that they have seen the updates. And so if you update it annually, then you're going to have them sign off on it annually. Okay.
I want to ask one question about the legal review. I know that there are many people who call themselves employment attorneys. Some of them specialize in working for the employees, and some specialize in working for employers, right? So you
Yes.
need to make sure you get the ones that are going to keep your best interest at heart, right?
Yes. 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 Thank you
Okay.
for that clarification.
Okay.
So now we have been handling questions all along. What I would like to know though is, are there other questions that we haven't addressed?
Yeah, so you guys can grab this. I will also put it in the email that I'll send to you tomorrow with the recording link. So you should also know Myra does these for a living. So if you want to talk to her about, contracting with her, you are welcome to have that conversation. But I feel like I learned a ton. I'm going to stop the recording, and I think you can stop sharing.